So, excellent. Now we're recording's in progress. So, good morning. Welcome to our meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. And to begin, respectfully acknowledge that today's meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Wasanus First Nations. And with that, I'd like a motion to adopt today's agenda. Someone can raise their, oh, there you go. Paige is making notes of who's adopting. Marvelous. And are there any errors or additions to our previous meeting minutes of June 16th? Hearing none, just get a motion.
Brett?
Yes.
Sorry, just I think there might have been just in the list of who was present, some errors there. I think I'm missing, and we got A. Hick.
A. Hick.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I will rectify that right away. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I got it.
Those two.
Yes. We call Andrew a lot of things, but not a Hick, so it's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. All right then. With that, we'll quickly run through our old business. Mike's away, so a lot of the updates that Deputy Harmon usually provides, I will endeavor to do the best I can. To begin with, our senior care facilities, they're doing well. There's no concerns there, so I have nothing to report. Our grant application, obviously, as you're aware, has been approved by UBCM, and our consultant is working away, and we have had a number of meetings on the evacuation route planning, so that's well underway. No issues that we're aware of with the Mary Winspear COVID-19 clinic. I'm looking out the window. It remains steady. Occasionally pop over there just to see how things are going. They don't really have needs or wants for anything, so it's going well, and we're here to help and support them, but things are going well. Off-street parking, sidewalk, cafe, I'm not aware of any new applications or concerns, and I don't know if Bruce or Corey can chime in, but I believe that it's all kind of quiet on the Western Front when it comes to outdoor seating at this time, if that's correct. Is that correct there, Bruce?
I haven't seen any recent applications since we were as normal.
Marvelous. Well, that makes life easy. Jumping down, the Town of Sydney reopening plan was successfully implemented. Lots of good work done by Randy administration, and as well as Rob Cook and the our safety officer. So that's been done, and we continue to work to transition as the work safe requirements dictate from a COVID safety plan to a communicable disease plan. So that's kind of ongoing, but we're making good progress on that as well. In respect to emergency planning committee tasks and goals, obviously, as we've been all COVID all the time for the last 18 to 24 months, so we haven't made any real progress on our United Nations application as a resilient city, but the folder's sitting on my desk, and we will get to that. And the emergency drinking water, I have made some progress on that, and hopefully in the next meeting or so, I can bring forward some plan, kind of a rough plan, rough order of magnitude costing, and how that would look. I need to spend some time with our engineering folks as well to kind of go over that before we bring that forward. That is basically a real quick synopsis of the old business, unless anyone else has anything from old business before we kind of jump into some new business. Hearing none, this is going to be a quick meeting, which is always a good thing. New business, refresh of our hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis. So as this group knows, I do hear kind of a weird noise in the background. I don't know who maybe needs to mute their computer there, but I heard some noise there. Our hazard, risk, and vulnerable analysis is basically what we base our emergency response planning on, and it looks specifically at the hazards and risks and the vulnerabilities specific to the town. And the best practice from emergency management perspective is that gets updated every 3 years. Where the last one we had was delivered early in 2018. So we're kind of in that window now where we can consider engaging our consultant to do a quick kind of refresh. There's no question with the significant built form changes that have been, particularly in our downtown neighborhood, and as other places, that the risk profile continues to kind of change and evolve in the town. So that is something we'll be looking at our emergency planning budget and see what's left and see if we can get a kind of a quick update concluded before year's end based on consultant availability. And then probably the largest issue of the last 2 or 3 weeks has been obviously the recent heat wave. Obviously a concern that hit for us, and as a result, there was no real plans anywhere on the Southern Island or any municipalities had any kind of something they could pull off the shelf and say, here's a plan to initiate cooling centers. There's been a ton of work and communication where the local government emergency planning committee and the emergency planning committee at the CRD level and the Lower Island all kind of working and doing after action reports and planning about how best to deal with this kind of emerging obviously climate emergency, but seeing unprecedented temperatures and resulting medical emergencies that I don't know if we'll ever really get a good handle on how many hospitalizations or fatalities were directly linked to it, but there's no doubt it was a significant contributing factor for those 2 or 3 days where we experienced a heat well in excess of 35 degrees. We're making a concerted effort here in the town to have a cooling center plan that the town would initiate. And we want to have that basically in place as early as this month's end. I have a draft. We engaged a consultant and have a draft. There are a number of other kind of plans in the CRD. Some go out as far as completion and implementation in 2024, and I'm not interested in something like that. I want something that actually will positively benefit our residents this summer in the event that we have another significant heat event. So it's a draft right now. It's not something that it's still early days. We have a number of other little kind of inputs to put into it, but basically the trigger for activation would be we would stand up an EOC level 1 24 hours before high temperatures were expected to reach 35 degrees centigrade within the community. And then we've already engaged a number of partners that would help us from Beacon Community Services, obviously Emergency Management BC. We have a number of designated sites that we already have supplier agreements with. Obviously there'd be a PMO component and a number of other things. So it's a work in progress, and we'll have a kind of a more fulsome update once the plan is finalized and for review. But that's where we are right now. And again, if everything goes well, hopefully close or near to the end of the month, we'll actually have this plan in place and be able to be implemented if we get another significant heat event that will affect specifically to the residents of Sydney. We did reach out to North Saanich, and they're clear that they had no intent of.
Hi, it's Terry.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, yay! I figured it out. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. All right, so we'll just continue, and I was just stating that in respect to cooling centers, we reached out to North Saanich and they didn't have any intent at this time to develop or participate in planning for initiating my cooling centers. So this is kind of a singular town of Sydney emergency management plan, and that's the way it's designed. So if there are any questions about why it's kind of not a larger Saanich Peninsula initiative, it's that's the rationale. So are there any comments, concerns specific to cooling centers and, you know, how we'd roll that out? And again, we'll communicate in a real kind of fulsome way once we have, you know, a final draft for review, but it's still kind of a work in progress at that time. But that's really been a large focus of our emergency management time, the little time we have, and for the last 3 or 4 weeks trying to put that together.
Hey, Brett, sorry if maybe you covered it already, but did we get many calls or situations from people or seniors who were having issues with the heat during that period?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the metrics to determine, you know, how many additional medical calls resulted specifically from the heat is going to be difficult. But we were no different than, you know, anybody else in the Southern Island or the Lower Mainland that saw a significant spike in medical calls, particularly to the elderly population, which we're definitely not short on in the town of Sydney. And a lot of these people have, you know, comorbidities or other medical issues that make them more susceptible to heat stress than others. And then add on top of that, you know, a very stressed and taxed ambulance service, adding on, you know, crazy, for lack of a better term, waits and delays. That all made for a busy time. So we were very much affected as most other municipalities in the CRD were.
Oh, right. I was wondering, so with that new emergency alert system, is that something that might be incorporated in the future for something like this, like in an extreme event like that, where we could send an alert out to people to let them know where the cooling centers are, or whether there was a way that we could mobilize community groups to go and pick up people who aren't mobile to bring them to those places?
Yeah, those are great questions, and the answer is yes to both. We would use Saanich Pinsa Alert in a targeted fashion once, and that's part and parcel of the reason that we would initiate our EOC 24 hours in advance, is to, you know, work, you know, we don't have canned messages specific for that yet or anything, but that would be some of the work that would be done prior to push out that messaging. And yes, we have looked, and we talked about Beacon Community Services. They have folks that drive people around and the like. We would work with them and perhaps even work with our PMO group, whether it be the search and rescue folks, to use them in PMO vehicles to actually move people in under extreme circumstances to cooling centers. One of the lags, but the difficult, we're in the process of identifying large buildings that are not air conditioned, and there's a very large number in the town of Sydney that are not air conditioned, where the rooms are not air conditioned. They're air conditioned hallways, for example, or air conditioned lobbies, but the individual suites are not air conditioned. And looking at who is most at risk is not our population of folks that are in nursing homes or extended care facilities, because those are typically all air conditioned. And then of course there's actually staff that are checking on the wellness of these people at regulated intervals. You know, the most at risk people are elderly that are living at home and on a fixed income, you know, on a second or third floor apartment. So we've been going around and triaging, and we just provided that data to our consultant yesterday. It's not complete, but we're sending that and trying to work on how best to identify those buildings in particular or groups. And then from there, we can kind of map out areas where cooling centers or zones, or if you're in that specific location, where you could go. And again, some of the municipalities, the few municipalities that do have detailed kind of heat response plans. City of Vancouver, Burnaby are the only two that really come to mind. It's one thing simply to, you can house people and cool them off, but you can't do that indefinitely, and we don't know how long these events are going to last. So we need to create literature and provide them with handouts for the like of how you can go back to your second or third story apartment and, successfully kind of ride out, a more heat stress, or, if the temperatures aren't 35, but if they're 32 or 33, provide these folks with some literature and some ways to kind of mitigate that heat. And for example, Burnaby does that in Vancouver. So we're also looking at, having that literature and being able to arm these folks when they do leave a cooling center to be able to kind of do well on their own. So this is all kind of work that's going on in the background.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you for that.
Andrew, I saw you had your finger.
Randy was first.
Randy was first. You're pointing the wrong way on my screen, but I get it. So there you go. Go ahead, Randy.
I'll be quick. Yeah, Brett, thanks for that really comprehensive overview on that, and also for the proactive approach in working with a consultant on developing some additional emergency plan around these extreme heat events that I don't know if it's I wouldn't call it the new normal, because they're probably only going to get worse over time with climate change, and we'll probably see them more and more. The letter from Island Health that we received, or that went to council, and that's on the agenda, I thought was really interesting in the sense that they sort of tie these heat events, with other sort of extreme events that are related, i.e. the wildfires and what we're seeing right now in the interior, and how the heat event that we saw several weeks ago has probably exacerbated the situation, or certainly made things progress much quicker in terms of the wildfire situation, and then the whole mental health component. But reflecting on that, when you look at that particular letter, it makes reference to larger cities like Vancouver, and you mentioned Burnaby and Victoria, perhaps, and these kinds of things that maybe have the resources and the capacity and the facilities to be able to shelter people in cooling stations and that sort of thing. There are real limitations, I think, that need to be acknowledged in smaller municipalities around the kinds of facilities that may not exist. So I think there's a balance there in terms of a degree of recognition that there are limitations, and that, again, the importance of education and preparation for people. And again, acknowledging we're a seniors community, and I get it, and folks are going to need assistance, but there also needs to be a recognition about education and awareness, and people being prepared for these kinds of things that, again, will likely be a more common occurrence. And I was going to make one other point. Oh, adaptation planning as well. And I think about, and the letter mentions what smaller municipalities, what smaller places can do, creating more shaded areas, those kinds of things, looking at more water stations, water fountains, those kinds of things as well, right? But so adaptation planning is something that needs to probably, we need to think about as well when we're looking at planning for more of these types of extreme events. So, yeah.
No, those are all great comments right now, and agree 100%. And like, it's no different whether it's a heat event or a snow event or what have you. Everybody is responsible for their own health and safety, to be prepared for the 72 hours of preparedness. And that is, that's a given. And that's why we really wanted to kind of look at the threshold of the 35 degrees centigrade, because I think, pushing it off to the consultant who has worked with other municipalities, mentioned Burnaby, Vancouver and the like, and again, looking specifically at that cohort of residents that we have a number of, that no matter what the mitigation strategies are, that would likely suffer or be at high risk for, you know, a medical emergency or an issue, you know, those are the folks that we're really targeting, and trying to provide some quick, you know, very temporary relief to. That's our targeted cohort. It's not the 30-year-olds, or I mean, everyone's at risk, but there's very, very clear data already that, you know, those in excess of 70 years old that have comorbidities that are on the 3rd floor and the heat is soaked into the building, those are the ones that are really going to suffer, and those are our targets. And by doing our building inventory, those are really the ones in the areas that we're targeting for cooling centers, and kind of fanning out from a knowledge perspective that this service or emergency plan will be in place.
Thanks.
Any other comments on cooling centers? It's a yes, Mr. Hisek.
Just a small gap, I think, in our procedures. So my department is essentially the reception for the town. So we probably got half a dozen phone calls on the day the heat wave really hit. And it took us a while to be informed that Beacon Community Services was open as a resource. So we were turning people away, not knowing that there was an option locally. So next time, if something is up and running, please take time to let finance know. And then when people call, we can give them the right information.
Yeah, you bet. That's a great point, Andrew. And I know that, you know, the cooling center at the Shoal Center wasn't established until we were probably about halfway through the event. So, but fair enough, and we'll need to coordinate. And I think, again, that's the idea of establishing, if we do have a true heat event, of establishing even a very limited EOC 24 hours before provides that mechanism for coordination and notification. That's kind of why we have a trigger point, and then everyone would kind of be looped in, so nothing's kind of left to chance.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Going back to your discussion about North Saanach's lack of interest in this initiative, despite that fact, are we incorporating any planning in terms of capacity for North Saanich residents? I mean, I think there's probably a number of them who, you know, just because they're in North Saanich and the cooling centers in Sydney aren't going to hesitate to come and take advantage of it. So it might be good to incorporate that.
No, and there's absolutely, we're not going to obviously turn people away. But again, the most at-risk folks are, you look at 10025 Resthaven, right across from the Shoal Center, 4 stories, old wood frame, no air conditioning, lots of fixed income seniors. There's not a lot of that housing in North Saanich. So
That's true, yeah.
that risk profile doesn't really transfer over to North Saanich the same way. But no, your point's very well taken. But again, that's kind of very specific to who we're targeting with this response plan. And really, like Randy alluded to, we're a small municipality. I mean, we're very nimble and can put a lot of these things into place, but our capacity is limited, and we can't open up a cooling center for everybody. We need to really have it targeted primarily to those most at risk.
Yeah.
We're likely going to use PMO resources, which are funded by all 3 municipalities. So
Exactly.
they'll be helping to get the word out, collect people and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
And just one other suggestion, if, I mean, it seems like there's a significant kind of climate change adaptation component emerging here. If you think there's room on the committee for Kira to participate, just so she's sort of in the loop, feel free to invite her next time as well. She might be a good addition.
Excellent. No, that was an excellent recommendation, and we've been chatting a lot, and I think she would be a great addition, and we've been working closely on a number of things. So I think that's a great point. We'll happily do that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Other, yes, Bruce.
Just on the question on the cooling centers. So you had some discussions with North Saanich, probably Central. Is the CRD also partnered in any of the cooling centers? I'm thinking like Panorama Center. I know it's not right within Sydney, but it's a large facility that might be able to.
Yeah, and again, the CRD, there's a whole raft of discussions going on, and a lot of, I mean, it's all good discussion, a lot of after action planning, a lot of integration with emergency health services and Island Health and a number of things. But I'd kind of circle back to, being kind of focused and nimble. We can transition and do something quickly, where the CRD and involving a whole multitude of municipalities, nothing gets done quickly. So that's my concern, and that's why we've kind of gone somewhat on our own. Probably the only other municipality that is moving at the pace that we are would be Esquimalt, and we'll probably leverage some resources with them, and vice versa to implement things. Everyone, we will all get on the same page in respect to consistent messaging and the like, but I wanted to have a plan that was basically tailor-made to Sydney and our very kind of unique cohort of at-risk residents. And I didn't want that diluted or delayed just for the sake of, being part of a CRD initiative that may be in place in 6 months or a year. So we've kind of gone on our own.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks, Brett.
There's no reason why some of the cooling centers can't be outside our jurisdiction, right? I mean, make a deal with Panorama or whoever on just outside our border, it's still easy to get to.
It is, but again, a lot of these, when you talk about the linkage to PMO, which is accurate, these are all buildings, for example, Shoal Center, which obviously we have a stake in, or air-conditioned churches or the like. We have to have pre-existing user agreements through PMO, i.e. as a reception center. And those aren't things that we have in place with the Panorama. So obviously the Shoal Center, Mary Winspear, a number of, like I say, churches, some other areas like that, potentially even we haven't gone down the path, but the library, these are all ones that essentially within 24 hours, we can make happen. And that's not as easy to do with a CRD entity, but you are correct. But we're really focusing on those ones that within 24 hours, we can occupy if we have to.
Hey, Brett.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do we have an idea of how many people took advantage of the cooling center at the Shoal Center? Was there a lot? And is there, do you get a sense that there's enough capacity there? Or would we have to, bring in other places, like you mentioned, maybe the library or Mary Winspear? And then one other question just about the company there that went and put in misters or something with their heat pump or whatever it was up at the Mary Winspear during the vaccinations. I'm just curious how that came about. Did they just offer that on their own, or had we reached out to them or Mary Winspear? Just wondering how that all unfolded as well.
Sure. So I'll answer the misting one first. I believe that was a request made by DHA, and then I forget the name of the company, but they stepped up and assisted and provided that.
Okay.
There was a whole raft of work that was being done by emergency management, teams and facilities all over the island to keep vaccination centers open. They were experiencing a number of issues with staff, as well as people waiting out in front in the lines in the extreme heat. So our public works staff stepped up. I think I took a call on a Saturday or a Sunday, and we worked to get some temporary tents set up just so people weren't waiting in, basically just getting beat down by the sun. So there was a little bit of shade. And VHA was accessing, misters and the like for people lining up outside. So obviously with COVID, you need to maintain the distancing. So that was a real challenge, but a few centers on the island actually had to shut down for a day or two, but the Mary Winspear managed to stay open, which was excellent. So that's how that arrived. I honestly don't know how the capacity was at the Shoals Center for the cooling center. I do believe that if we had another event and it was significant and we publicized it a little bit more at the outset beforehand, I would anticipate that the capacity or the requirement would be, definitely exceed what we had previously. This is all kind of, uncharted territory, but we'll make sure that we have, significant capacity and kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best in respect to that as we move forward.
Yeah, right. Good. Thank you for that.
Any other heat-related issues? Well, that's good. Hopefully we can avoid any other heat-related issues. I just have a couple of things as we'll transition to roundtable. I'll just start off. We did have an engine up for 5 or 6 days at the request of the Office of the Fire Commissioner in 100 Mile House area. I drove through Lytton, saw all of that and participated and assisted some other local fire departments in rural BC with some actioning some structure fires and a few things like that, and provided assistance, and they came home, which is great. And then obviously at midnight last night or today, the Provincial Declaration went into effect for the wildfire emergency. So as soon as one declaration ends, it seems we can get the transition to another. So as it stands right now, we haven't been requested to send any equipment, and it doesn't really break my heart, but we continue to try to work with our crews and kind of balance priorities here, that if we are called, we'll do our best to obviously participate in a wildfire deployment. It changes a little bit when there's a provincial declaration. When there's not a provincial declaration and they request equipment, it's simply on a yes, we can send it, or no, we can't. When there's a provincial declaration, the onus shifts a little bit to you send it, or you have to prove that there's going to be undue hardship if you don't send it. That's where the kind of a weight of a provincial declaration provides. So we continue to kind of draft contingency plans and work with our colleagues on the peninsula to ensure we have coverage everywhere. But I think we're in good shape. If we have to send an engine away, I might tap on some colleagues, maybe even as far as the West Shore, for some senior staff to assist manning the or providing staffing, so we're not completely tapping out our staff. But from an apparatus perspective, we could definitely send a truck. So we're looking at that and trying to be ready, because it's usually my phone rings at about 11 o'clock at night and they say you need to be on the 7 o'clock ferry the next morning. So that's kind of the warning that I get. So it's we go home with plans in our pocket. Any comments on that or any other roundtable issues? Mr. DeMare.
Yeah, just not related to the wildfires, but it relates to the emergency drinking water we had about earlier. Had a meeting recently with the CRD, the Central Peninsula Water Commission. They've directed their staff to do a couple items. One, they're looking at some capital projects to address some vulnerabilities in the peninsula water supply system. So they're looking at that for 2021 to 2025, some capital projects. So that's great. So that's going to hopefully secure better water from Souk out to the peninsula. And the other component of it was they're also creating a technical working group for the peninsula. So they're going to be reaching out to fire departments, public works, and engineering to bring in staff to form part of this technical working group for the various peninsula municipalities to talk about post-disaster water supplies. So you'll be seeing something on that here. I think they're looking sort of end of September, but some very positive actions here by the CRD to look at post-disaster water supply. So just an update on that.
That's very positive. I'm glad to hear. So when they talk about their plan from 2021 to 2025, would that be, are they actually going to harden or seismically couple the supply lines from the Soup Reservoir to the Saanich Peninsula?
The two projects they're looking at is what they've referred to as the Bear Hill Interconnect Project, which is linking the reservoir on Bear Hill to the Mount Newton and Dean Park area, and the reservoir at McTavish, because I think they had recently had the issue where they were, North Center was concerned with the volume of water through the heat wave that we had. And the other one is a replacement of about 4 kilometers of existing AC mains along Wellington Road between McTavish and Mills.
Okay. Any talk of putting any hardened blue hydrants for emergency water supply in the town of Sydney?
There's no discussion specifically on that. I think that will come out of the technical working group on how and what means we're going to try to provide that emergency water service to the community, be it the blue hydrants is by hardening lines. I know we're going forth with trying to harden some of our lines from east to west to East Sydney. But yeah, this is a good timing that we can have a cohesive plan going forward for emergency water supply post-disaster.
No, that's excellent. That's good news. I know when I started with the town in 2011, 2012, working with the CRD, they were initiating a very light plan. So hopefully this one comes to fruition. But that's positive. I would say that, you know, our plan, the plan that I've been looking at is my colleague in the township of Langley. They have high quality, obviously wells and static water supplies. It's a vast municipality. And what they've done is incorporated filtration systems on their apparatus. So a manufacturer called Darley actually provides an onboard filtration system. So we wouldn't have to worry about the potability of water coming out of our wells. We would merely just need to have the water being able to draw water out, and then it would actually go through a purification system on an apparatus or a trailer or something like that. And then we could actually just provide potable water, and it would be immediately transportable to various locations. So that's kind of a plan B or something that we could look at as well. So I think that's another thing we could look at in parallel. And again, it might come to fruition before the CRD plan. It might not, but it's always good to have options.
Yep. Yeah, I think those are some great discussions and points that we can bring up with the working group, because obviously there's different approaches to post-disaster water supply, and, you know, to have a good look and see which is the best direction.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I always look back to the worst case scenario is, you know, we say everyone needs to be able to look after themselves in worst case if it's a seismic event for 72 hours, and that's easy. If you're, you know, if you're Corey or someone like that, you know, you should have some water jugs where you could walk to a community fill station and look after yourself, look after your family. But we have such a large number of folks that live, you know, well over 1,000, probably a couple thousand between Mills and Henry Avenue, that live in extended care, long range retirement facilities, that's not a reasonable expectation. So we're going to need, we need to provide a mechanism to deliver water to them, whether that's out of a hard hydrant or purified water out of a well. You know, we need to kind of look at it through that lens. If we were Langford and everyone was young and able-bodied, well, everyone gets a 5-gallon jug and you're on your own. That's reality, but that's not Sydney. So we always kind of need to look at things through that lens.
Does any department on the peninsula have a tender that we could?
Yep. Well, there is a large, and this is the issue. Yes, the North Saanich has procured a very large and expensive tender. Again, in the context of when we're really going to need this, it's going to be post-seismic. So that vehicle is 42 feet long and weighs probably 75,000 pounds. So if it's not on a flat paved road, it's pretty much useless. So we need a old rough and tumble 4-wheel drive cheap machine that we can bolt a water purification device on that has a tank on it, because we need to look at it through the context of a worst case scenario. You know, if the water system is not functioning, you have to assume that the transportation network is not intact as well. So that's how I would look at that.
Makes sense to me to look to acquire one of these through the PMO arrangement so that we're not duplicating this seldom used piece of equipment rather than looking to get our own.
I agree. No, and that's part of the plan is to do something like that.
Can I just suggest too, in the context of the official community plan review that's underway right now, that if there are, I mean, some of this stuff may be too small and specific to put in a plan like an OCP, but there might also be sort of general principles that we should be looking at in terms of like policy inclusion into the document. So if you do think, if you're working on something that you think might be worthy of sort of a broader kind of 20-year look, an initiative that might need a decade or two to be carried out, then that might be worth looking at as something in the OCP. And it doesn't commit us to anything, but it just sort of records it for future posterity and gives council sort of a touch point on, yeah, this was discussed at some point and is worthy of considering in the future. So just a reminder about that, and feel free to shoot me an email with just an item that we can table for future discussion when we're drafting the plan sections.
No, absolutely. I've the last 2 or 3 years, my appreciation for land use planning and climate change have grown tenfold. So in respect to how they all correlate. So there's absolutely, we'll work with that, and I'll work with Kira on that as well.
Perfect.
Other roundtable items. Since we're having all this cheery emergency planning end of the world discussion, is there anything else we can put out there, or does that bring a conclusion to our meeting today? Well, it was good, very good meeting today, and I do look forward, like I say, our primary. Well, I have to conclude this meeting because there's alarm bells, so we'll sign off. Thanks for coming very much.